The brother who never cared for their mother inherited $100,000 from her, while the attentive brother received only an old cabin. However, there is a big surprise inside the cabin. The death of matriarch Collins deeply shook the family. Charles and Peter, her sons, were present for the reading of the will, held in the old office of the family home. Charles, the eldest son, was always close to his mother, while Peter, the youngest, had distanced himself in recent years, focusing on his own life in the city. The tension was palpable in the room when the lawyer opened the will. Charles watched attentively, while Peter impatiently looked at his watch, visibly annoyed with the formality of the moment. "Charles Collins, you inherit the hunting cabin located in Pine Forest, along with all its contents," said the lawyer. "Hunting cabin?" Peter scoffed, releasing a sarcastic laugh. "What are you going to do with an old, dusty cabin in the middle of nowhere, Charles?" Charles remained calm, though he could feel the anger rising within him. "It's not just a cabin, Peter. It was important to Mom, and I'm going to find out why." Peter shook his head, still laughing. "Good luck with that. And what about me?" The lawyer looked at Peter with a neutral expression. "Peter Collins, you inherit $100,000 in cash." Peter's eyes lit up. "Now that's a real inheritance." The reading of the will revealed the growing gap between the brothers. Peter mocked Charles's inheritance, treating the cabin as a worthless burden. Charles, however, felt a strange attachment to the idea of exploring the place, determined to honor his mother's memory. "I can't believe you're actually going to waste time on this," Peter continued. "But good luck, brother. I'll spend my money more wisely." Charles took a deep breath, ignoring the taunts. "Everyone makes their own choices, Peter. I'm going to the cabin this weekend. I'm sure there's more there than you think." The following weekend, Charles drove to the cabin in Pine Forest. The road was long and winding, surrounded by tall trees that formed a natural tunnel. Upon arrival, he found the cabin covered in dust and cobwebs, clearly abandoned for years. "Well, here we are," Charles said to himself, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Let's see what we have here." Inside, the air was thick, and the smell of old wood filled the space. Charles began to explore, passing through old furniture and objects that seemed forgotten in time. As he moved an old bookshelf, he noticed something peculiar, a loose floorboard. "This is interesting," he murmured, kneeling to examine the board. With a bit of effort, he removed it, revealing a secret compartment. Inside was a well-preserved wooden box. His hands trembled with excitement and anxiety as he opened the box, revealing a collection of rare watches and old jewelry, all carefully stored. "Wow," he said, amazed. "This is incredible." Charles was astonished. The relics were not only financially valuable, but also emotionally significant, representing moments and memories from his mother's life. He felt a deep connection with her at that moment, realizing that the cabin, once scorned, was a hidden treasure. "Now I understand, Mom," he whispered, holding one of the old watches. "You knew I would find this, didn't you?" With a heart full of gratitude and determination, Charles decided he would protect and cherish this legacy, no matter what Peter said or did. Peter quickly found a way to spend his inheritance. Drawn to the adrenaline and promise of quick gains, he plunged into the world of gambling. Initially, luck seemed to be on his side, but soon the losses began to pile up, leaving him with significant debts. "You're running out of luck, Peter," said one of his gambling friends, watching Peter lose another round of poker. "It's none of your business," Peter snapped back. "I just need one good round to recover everything." But luck was not on his side that night. Leaving the casino, Peter went to a local bar to try to drown his frustrations. At the bar, he encountered an old acquaintance, Mike, who had been a close friend in childhood. "Peter, it's been a while," exclaimed Mike, slapping Peter on the shoulder. "How have you been?" "Mike, you have no idea," Peter replied, accepting the drink offered. "Things are not going well. I've lost almost everything in gambling." Mike looked at him with a curious expression. "Really? I thought you had received a good inheritance recently." Peter sighed. "I did, but I've already spent most of it. I wasn't as lucky as I hoped." Mike frowned, thinking about something. "I heard that your brother Charles found something valuable in your mother's old cabin. Some local folks have been talking about it." "What?" Peter asked, intrigued. "What are you talking about?" "Yes," continued Mike. "It seems he found some old watches and jewelry. People say it's worth a good chunk of money." Peter's envy quickly turned into anger. He couldn't believe that Charles had had such luck. On the ride back home, flashbacks of their childhood passed through his mind. He always felt that Charles was the favorite, the son who always did everything right. "Why does he always get everything?" Peter muttered to himself. "I deserve a part of that." When he got home, Peter threw himself on the couch and stared at the ceiling. He remembered all the times his mother seemed to prefer Charles. In school, Charles was the exemplary student, while Peter always seemed to be in trouble. "I remember that time Mom came to pick me up at the police station," Peter thought. She was so disappointed, but when Charles won that science award, she couldn't stop smiling. Envy ate away at Peter from the inside. He always thought his mother liked Charles more, and now this discovery in the cabin only seemed to confirm it. Peter began to plan how he could claim part of Charles's treasure. He can't keep all of it for himself, Peter thought. I have to do something about it. I've always been left out, but not this time. With a heart full of grudge and envy, Peter decided he would find a way to claim what he considered rightfully his, no matter what it took. Charles was in the kitchen, preparing tea, when Ellen walked in. She had a special glow in her eyes, a glow that Charles loved. "How was it at the cabin?" asked Ellen, caressing her belly protectively. Charles smiled. "It was amazing, Ellen. I found a secret compartment full of old watches and jewelry. It was like Mom had left a treasure for us." Ellen approached and hugged Charles. "That's wonderful, love. But what are you going to do with all this?" Charles sighed. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to sell everything and ensure we're financially secure. But another part feels I should keep these relics, as a legacy from Mom." Ellen looked into Charles's eyes with a worried expression. "And Peter? Do you think he'll accept this peacefully?" "I doubt it," Charles replied, shaking his head. "He's already envious. I'm sure he'll try to claim part of it." "Then maybe you should talk to your dad," suggested Ellen. "He might give you some advice on how to deal with Peter and protect what's ours." Charles nodded. "You're right. I'll visit him tomorrow. We need to resolve this before things get out of hand." The next day, Charles drove to his father's house. They sat in the garden, where his father liked to spend his afternoons. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," began Charles, explaining everything he had found in the cabin and his concerns about Peter. Charles's father listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "You did well to tell me, son. Knowing Peter, he won't give up easily, but you have the right to protect your mother's legacy." "I just want to do what's right," said Charles, sighing. "But I don't want to create more problems in the family." "Sometimes doing what's right means facing conflicts," replied the father. "But you're not alone in this. Ellen and I are here to support you. And remember, honesty and justice always prevail in the end." Charles felt a weight lift from his shoulders. With the support of his family, he was ready to face any challenges that lay ahead. Peter showed up unannounced at Charles's house. It was clear he was agitated, pacing back and forth in the front yard while waiting for Charles to open the door. Upon seeing his brother's state, Charles felt a chill. "Peter, what are you doing here?" asked Charles, trying to stay calm. "We need to talk," Peter responded, entering without waiting for an invitation. "I heard you found a bunch of valuable things in the cabin. Watches, jewelry. Is that true?" Charles sighed, realizing the situation was going to get complicated. "Yes, I found some things that belonged to Mom. But it's not that simple, Peter." "Not that simple? Of course it is." Peter stepped closer, the anger evident on his face. "I have a right to part of that too. I'm your brother, for God's sake." "You received your part of the inheritance, Peter. The money Mom left for you," Charles said, trying to keep his voice calm. "These relics are more than just monetary value. They hold deep emotional significance." "That's ridiculous," Peter retorted with disdain. "You think you can keep everything just because you think you deserve more? I'm her son, too." The argument heated up. Peter used every emotional trick he could think of, trying to manipulate Charles. "You've always been the favorite, haven't you? Always doing everything right, while I'm the failure. Well, that ends now. I want my share, Charles." "This isn't about favoritism," Charles replied, his patience wearing thin. "This is about respecting what Mom wanted. I won't let you destroy that out of greed." "Greed? You're calling me greedy?" Peter advanced, his eyes flashing with anger. "I have debts, Charles. Debts that could ruin my life. You have a family, you're expecting a child. Can't you understand that I need help too?" Charles fell silent for a moment, feeling the tension build. "I understand you're in a tough situation, Peter. But that doesn't justify you trying to take something that isn't yours. I'll seek legal help if necessary." "Would you do that? Take your own brother to court?" Peter asked incredulously. "If it protects Mom's legacy, yes, I would," Charles answered firmly. The next day, Charles decided to seek professional help. He scheduled an appointment with a renowned lawyer in town, Mr. Thompson. Sitting in the elegant office, Charles explained the entire situation, from discovering the relics to the confrontation with Peter. "What I want to know is how I can legally protect these relics," said Charles, anxious. Mr. Thompson listened attentively, jotting down important points. "I understand your concern, Charles. First, we need to establish that these items are part of your legitimate legacy. Do you have the inheritance documents?" "Yes, I brought everything." Charles handed over a folder of documents to the lawyer. As Mr. Thompson reviewed the papers, he explained, "If the relics were specifically left to you and not mentioned in the will as part of the general division, then you have a strong case. However, Peter can challenge this based on financial need, but that doesn't guarantee he'll succeed." Charles took a deep breath. What if he tries something more drastic? "You should be prepared for anything," Mr. Thompson replied. "I'll start preparing the necessary documentation to ensure that these items are legally recognized as part of your legacy. This will give us a stronger position in any future disputes." Meanwhile, Peter wasted no time. He contacted a lawyer known for his questionable ethics, Mr. Lawrence. Seated in Lawrence's dark, dimly lit office, Peter explained his situation, emphasizing his debts and Charles's discovery. "So, you want a share of the treasure your brother found," said Lawrence, stroking his chin. "We might find some legal loopholes, especially if he hasn't properly registered these items as part of his inheritance." "I need that money, Lawrence. I can't let Charles keep it all," said Peter, the anxiety evident in his voice. "Let's see what we can do," Lawrence replied with a sly smile. "I'll prepare a plan to challenge the possession of these relics. We'll make Charles prove that they belong exclusively to him." The tension between the brothers escalated as both prepared for a possible legal battle. Charles, with the support of Ellen and Mr. Thompson, was determined to protect his mother's legacy. Peter, with the help of Lawrence, was willing to do anything to get what he considered his rightful share. Ellen felt a wave of emotions when the pregnancy test turned positive. She and Charles had been trying for some time, and now, with all the family tension, the news was a ray of hope. Eager to tell Charles, she waited until he returned from work. "Charles, I have a surprise for you," said Ellen, trying to contain her smile as he walked through the door. Charles noticed Ellen's radiant expression. "What happened? It looks like you have good news." Ellen handed the pregnancy test to him. "We're expecting a baby, Charles." Charles's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "That's wonderful, Ellen. I can hardly believe it. We're going to have a child." They embraced, feeling the joy and hope growing inside them. The pregnancy news brought a new layer of concern, but also strengthened Charles's determination to protect his mother's legacy for the future of their child. "This changes everything," said Charles, caressing Ellen's belly. "Now, more than ever, I need to ensure that our child has a secure future and that Mom's legacy is preserved." "I know," Ellen replied, "and I'm here to support you in everything. We'll face this together, Charles." The following days were filled with preparations and plans. Ellen underwent medical exams, and the couple started discussing names and dreaming about the future. Each moment of tenderness between them reinforced their love and mutual support, creating a solid foundation to face the challenges ahead. "We'll overcome this, Ellen," Charles said one night as they lay in bed. "We'll protect our family and ensure our child grows up in a safe and loving environment." "I believe in you, Charles," Ellen replied, holding his hand. "We'll make it." The news of Ellen's pregnancy gave Charles a new perspective and renewed strength to face Peter. However, Peter was not backing down. He intensified his attempts to obtain the treasure, now threatening to take Charles to court. Charles received a court summons, and the stress began to mount. "He's really willing to go this far," Charles said, reading the document. "This is going to be a tough battle." "We need to be prepared," Ellen said, trying to stay calm. "Let's talk to Mr. Thompson and see what our options are." In the lawyer's office, Mr. Thompson explained what they could expect from the legal process. Peter will argue that he is entitled to a part of these relics due to his financial situation. "We need to build a solid case showing that these items are indeed part of your legitimate inheritance." "What if he convinces the judge?" Charles asked, worried. "We have to be ready for all possibilities," Thompson replied. "But with the documents you have and your mother's testimony, we have a good chance of winning." Back home, Charles and Ellen discussed strategies to handle the situation without compromising family peace. "Maybe we should try mediation before going to court," Ellen suggested. "It could be a way to resolve this without so much tension." "It's worth a try," Charles agreed. "I'll talk to Mr. Thompson about this possibility." Tension grew as the date of the court hearing approached. Each day seemed to bring a new worry, and Charles began to feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. But every time he saw Ellen caressing her belly, he knew he was doing the right thing. "No matter what happens," Charles said one evening while they were in the living room, "we will protect our family and Mom's legacy. That's the most important thing." Ellen held Charles's hand, feeling his determination. "We're in this together, Charles, and we'll come out stronger on the other side." As the date of the hearing approached, Charles and Ellen continued to support each other, strengthening their bond and preparing for the battle ahead. The hunting cabin, silent and secluded, was chosen as the venue for the family meeting. Charles hoped the tranquil setting would help ease tensions. Ellen was by his side, firmly holding his hand. The first to arrive were his father and some close family friends, followed by Peter, who entered with a defiant look. The presence of his lawyer, Mr. Lawrence, indicated that Peter was not willing to resolve things amicably. "Let's begin," said Charles, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've called this meeting to try to resolve our differences amicably. I don't want this to go to court." Peter laughed humorlessly. "Amicable? You want to keep everything for yourself, Charles. How is that amicable?" Charles took a deep breath. "That's not it, Peter. I want to ensure that Mom's legacy is respected." "Respected? That's a joke. You've always been the perfect son, haven't you?" Peter started to raise his voice. "Always thinking you know what's best for everyone. But I'm her son too, and I have a right to what's mine." Charles's father tried to intervene. "Peter, understand that Charles isn't trying to exclude you. These relics have sentimental value to him. There are other ways to resolve this." "Other ways?" Peter scoffed. "Like what? Letting him keep everything while I'm stuck with debts?" "We can negotiate," suggested Ellen calmly. "There's a way to resolve this without fighting." "Negotiate? I don't want to negotiate. I want what's rightfully mine." Peter was furious, and the tension in the room escalated. A family friend, present at the meeting, spoke in a conciliatory tone. "Let's all calm down. We're here to find a solution, not to argue." But the words fell on deaf ears. The meeting quickly devolved into an exchange of accusations and verbal confrontations. Charles and Peter faced off, airing old resentments and unhealed wounds. "You were never there when Mom needed you most," said Charles, his voice filled with emotion. "You were busy with your own life, while I took care of her." "That's easy for you to say," retorted Peter. "You always had everything, never had to struggle for anything." Peter's words revealed the depth of his envy and bitterness. The atmosphere was charged, and the meeting ended without an agreement, but with a decision that the case would have to be resolved in court. The family meeting had left everyone shaken, but Charles knew he needed to act quickly. The next day, he gathered the documents and evidence he had and scheduled another meeting with Mr. Thompson. "We need to be prepared for anything," said Charles as he showed the documents to the lawyer. "Peter is determined to take this to court." Mr. Thompson examined the papers attentively. "You have a solid case, Charles. We need to focus on proving that these relics were specifically left to you, and that Peter is trying to manipulate the situation." Meanwhile, Peter did not give up on his attempts. He called another meeting, this time at their father's house, to try to gain the support of family and friends. The room was filled with concerned relatives and close friends, all waiting to hear what Peter had to say. "Thank you for coming," began Peter, trying to appear conciliatory. "I'm just trying to get what's rightfully mine. I don't want to fight, but I also can't accept being left out." Charles arrived at the meeting prepared to expose Peter's true intentions. He stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. "Peter, it's time to stop this manipulation. Everyone here needs to know the truth." Peter's eyes narrowed, and he stared at Charles suspiciously. "What are you talking about, Charles?" Charles took a deep breath and began to lay everything out. "Peter isn't interested in the sentimental value of these relics. He's in a tough financial situation and is trying to use that as an excuse to take something that isn't his." The room fell silent as Charles continued. "I found evidence that Peter has gambling debts and plans to sell the relics to pay off those debts. This isn't about equal rights or justice. It's about greed." The family and friends' reaction was mixed. Some were shocked and supported Charles, while others, still sympathetic to Peter, questioned his intentions. "That's a lie!" shouted Peter, visibly shaken. "You're making this up to discredit me." "I'm not making anything up," replied Charles calmly. "I have documents that prove your debts. All I want is to protect our mother's legacy." Charles's father, with a sad expression, intervened. "Peter, if this is true, you need to be honest. We're here to help, but we can't support lies and manipulations." Peter fell silent, his anger turning into despair. I just wanted what's mine. I'm desperate, Charles. Peter's confession confirmed what Charles suspected. With the decision to take the case to court, the tension escalated. But the truth had finally been exposed. "We'll settle this in court," said Charles, his voice firm, "and we'll do it fairly." The atmosphere in the room was heavy with emotions. Some family members approached Charles, offering words of support. "We're on your side, Charles. We know you just want to do what's right," said a close cousin. Others, still loyal to Peter, expressed their concerns. "Peter, you need to sort out your debts and your life. It's not fair to try to take what isn't yours," said an uncle, his voice stern. Charles approached his father, who looked aged by the tension of the past days. "Dad, I know this is hard for you, but I'm trying to protect what Mom wanted." Charles's father nodded slowly. "I know, son. I just wish you two could find a way to resolve this without tearing our family apart." Peter, seeing the impact his actions had on the family, finally set aside his anger. "I've made mistakes, many mistakes, but I'm willing to face the consequences. I don't want to lose my family over this." Charles looked at his brother, feeling a mix of compassion and sadness. "Peter, there's a chance for redemption, but you need to be honest and take responsibility for your actions." Peter nodded, visibly moved. "I'll do that, Charles. I promise." The tension eased slightly, but everyone knew the next step would be crucial. "See you in court," said Charles, ending the meeting. "Let's let justice decide." With the truth exposed and the next steps clear, the family prepared for the legal battle ahead, knowing that their future was at stake. News of the family dispute between Charles and Peter spread quickly through the small community. Friends and neighbors, who had known the Collins family for years, began to mobilize to offer support. One afternoon, while Charles was in the cabin reviewing documents, he heard knocks on the door. Opening it, he found Mrs. Miller, a longtime neighbor, accompanied by other community members. "Charles, we've heard about the situation," said Mrs. Miller with a welcoming smile. "We wanted you to know that we're here to support you and your family." Charles was moved. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. This means a lot to us." Mr. Johnson, one of the neighbors, stepped forward. "If you need anything at all, we're here. This community has always been close-knit, and we know how much your mother meant to all of us." "I really appreciate that," responded Charles, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I'm doing my best to protect her legacy." The days that followed were filled with visits from friends and neighbors, offering advice, emotional support, and even practical help with the legal preparations. Ellen, watching the community come together, felt strengthened. "We're all in this together, Charles," said Ellen, as they welcomed more visitors. "This shows how much your mother was loved by everyone." Meanwhile, Peter began to realize the consequences of his actions. Isolated and with the pressure of the impending legal battle mounting, he reflected on the path he had chosen. One night, he went to the cabin where Charles was working. "Charles, can we talk?" he asked, in a tone less aggressive than usual. Charles looked at his brother, surprised. "Of course, Peter. Come in." Peter entered, visibly shaken. I don't know what to do anymore. The debts, the trial, it's all falling apart." Charles sighed. "Peter, I don't want to see you destroyed by this, but you need to understand that what you're doing isn't fair." "I know," admitted Peter, his eyes filled with regret. "I was greedy and let it consume me, but I don't know how to get out of this." "Maybe there's still time to sort things out," said Charles, "but we need to do it the right way." The support from the community and the opening of a sincere dialogue between the brothers strengthened Charles's resolve to move forward and protect his mother's legacy. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was filled with friends, neighbors, and community members there to support Charles. Peter sat across, visibly nervous. The atmosphere was tense, each person feeling the weight of the decision that was to come. The judge entered, and everyone stood up. "We are here to resolve the dispute over Mrs. Collins's inheritance. Both parties, please present your evidence." Mr. Thompson, Charles's lawyer, spoke first. "Your Honor, here are the documents that prove the relics were specifically left to my client, Charles Collins. We also have witnesses who can confirm Mrs. Collins's intention to leave these items to him." Charles watched intently as the judge examined the documents. Each second seemed like an eternity. Finally, the judge looked up. "Let's call the first witness," said the judge. Charles's father took the witness stand, his face serious and solemn. "Mr. Collins, can you tell us about your wife's intentions regarding the relics?" "Of course, Your Honor," he began. "My wife was very clear about wanting to leave these items to Charles. They have immense sentimental value and represent our family history. She knew that Charles would appreciate and care for them properly." The room fell silent, absorbing the poignant words of Charles's father. When it was Peter's turn, Mr. Lawrence tried to argue that Peter was entitled to part of the relics due to his financial difficulties. "Your Honor, my client, Peter Collins, is facing significant financial difficulties. Dividing these assets could help alleviate his situation, and it's only fair that he receives a part." Peter, nervous, watched as his lawyer spoke. He knew his gambling debts and manipulation would be hard to explain, but he still hoped. "Mr. Peter Collins," said the judge, "can you explain why you believe you are entitled to these items, apart from your financial situation?" Peter stood up, his voice slightly trembling. "Your Honor, I've made mistakes, many mistakes. But these items, they're part of our family. I just wanted a chance to stand up again, to redeem myself." The judge considered both sides, weighing the information presented. After hours of testimony and evidence presentation, he finally made his decision. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Collins intended to leave these relics specifically to Charles Collins. Therefore, I rule in favor of Charles Collins. As for Mr. Peter Collins, I recommend that he seek financial and legal counseling to deal with his debts appropriately. Peter bowed his head, defeated. Charles, relieved, thanked the judge and his lawyer. "Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, for all your help." After the trial, the community gathered at Charles and Ellen's home to celebrate. The atmosphere was one of relief and happiness. "You did the right thing, Charles," said Mrs. Miller, raising a glass. "Your mother would be proud of you." Ellen, holding Charles's hand, smiled. "Now we can focus on building our future, without worries." Peter, though defeated, approached Charles, his eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry for everything, Charles. I hope one day you can forgive me." Charles looked at his brother, compassion in his eyes. "I forgive you, Peter. Let's move forward and try to rebuild what was lost." Peter nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you, Charles. I'll try to be a better person." With peace restored and the community united, Charles and Ellen prepared for the arrival of their baby. The family was ready for new beginnings, strengthened by the challenges overcome and the assurance that Mrs. Collins's legacy would be preserved for future generations. "We're ready for this new phase," said Charles, holding Ellen's hand as they looked towards the future with hope and determination. If you enjoyed this moving story, don't forget to like the video, leave your comment about what you thought, and suggest new topics. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Remember, the true value lies in the memories we keep and the relationships we build.